Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Friday Food Fight. My name is Wes Christian, your host for this week, and I am joined once again by Mr. Bart Christian, nationally recognized speaker, and a very special guest. And Bart, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit more about our special guest that we're going to be talking with this week?
Our guest this week is Dr. John Pedicone. I got to tell you a story about John right off the bat. I met John not through my connections and education and whatnot. I met John on the golf course. And John has actually got one of the nicest golf carts that I have ever seen in my life. Definitely the nicest one in Oro Valley. And a couple of things I learned about John before I even knew who he was he's a funny guy, number one, and but he's also a very serious golfer because he's a great golfer. I get out playing with him, and I get embarrassed just watching him because he really is good. And one of the things that fascinates me about people as I've been blessed to be able to do this show is that, I met so many great people, and I get their resume, and then I read their resume or their CV, and I am just always amazed at how, that these people are just too smart to be my friends, to be honest with you. They just, because I look at John, and John, you've got quite a storied career. I mean, you were superintendent at Tucson Unified School District and at Flow and Wells here in Tucson, and you have won multitudes of awards. I know that you've been in education for how long
now? Over 4 years. Wow. As it's turned out, it's hard to believe.
Yeah. No, it is.
Long time, Bart.
I've been in this child nutrition business almost 30, so I can relate with that. And I look at the awards you've won. I mean, you've been named Arizona Superintendent of the Year. You've been the Arizona representative as a National Superintendent of the Year. And, it's just amazing that I didn't realize that you've actually got a building named after you in Flow and Wells School District. Tell us about that.
Well, first I want to thanks for doing this program. I never knew that you were doing this kind of thing for our support staff, and I think it's a really important thing that you do. It's everybody needs to have professional development, and this is a good example of how we can honor the people that we care the most about, that help to get our children to the schoolhouse door, feed them, and help us to do the job that we're charged with doing. So, tell me again what you just asked me. You wanted me to talk about
the building that they named after you in Flow and Wells. Tell us about that.
Well, so I was in Flow and Wells for 22 years, and I started as an assistant principal, principal, then assistant soup, and then a superintendent. And one of the things that Flow and Wells is really blessed to have is a really wonderful fine arts program. So we were able to hire some remarkable people to be able to put programs in place, and the board was always very supportive. And if you know Flow and Wells School District, it's it's a relatively lower income area in many of the parts of our community, but they're just a remarkably tight community. And so, when you work in that school district, you feel this strong affiliation to make sure that our children get the best services that they can, and they have the best opportunities that they can. So fine arts was one of those things. Oftentimes you see in school districts, one of the first things to go is fine arts when budgets get cut, and we were committed to not letting that happen. So anyway, as I got into the superintendency, I'm looking at high-end districts, and I'm seeing programs that they have that we just didn't have in Flow and Wells. We had a great dance program, wonderful band and chorus. Matter of fact, kind of nationally renowned choral programs. But what we didn't have was an orchestra. So the kids never got exposed to strings and that kind of thing. So we were able to get to the board, and I asked them if I can get a small budget amount, I'll raise the rest of it, and let's see if we can start a strings program with the intent of having an orchestra by the time they get to the high school. So we were able to do that. We started in the 6th grade, went to the Tucson Symphony, and was able to recruit a really wonderful violinist who said that she would dedicate a lot of her time to trying to put an elementary program in place, and she did. And boy, great respect for her. And Jennifer Goff is her name, and she did all 6 elementary schools at one time the first year. I think we started at the 5th grade, then we went to 6th. The next year we hired additional staff. So by the time I got to my last year as superintendent, we had a full orchestra at the high school, and it was just this really remarkable thing to see our little babies in Flow and Wells having the same opportunities that the kids in some high-end districts have. So unbeknownst to me, I was kind of a controlling person when it came to board agendas, as you can imagine. And so the board president and I had a really good relationship. But I get to a board meeting, and all of a sudden I see him go off script, and he puts an item in there that I was not aware of. So, as a superintendent, anybody out there that's ever been in these positions where you're supposed to be responsible for those things, I get a little gulp in my throat and go, all right, what's going on here? and it turned out that they were announcing that they named the Fine Arts Complex in my honor, which was really, really wonderful. So
cool.
every time I go up to Flowing Wells High School, I see that, I get tears well up in my eye, and it becomes one of the many special memories I have of a place that I spent 22 years being honored to serve in. So that's what that was about.
That's really cool.
I mean, there's no doubt in looking at the awards you've won as a humanitarian, as an educator, that you've left quite the legacy behind, and now you've got something concrete that'll be there for a long, long time. I think that's awesome. Yeah. I want to close kind of this introduction with saying, you served on the Arizona State Board of Education, on the Governor's Education Advisory Board for the state of Arizona. I mean, just wow. But you also, like me, you always kind of get brought down to the ground by that woman that you married. And, I see you've been married 44 years. You got three sons and a grandson. And I also know that you have a dog that you didn't list on here.
A couple of them, actually. we have Italian dogs. We have Guido, and we lost Capone about 2 years ago. So, yeah, we're down to the twos. Yeah. But Bart, I appreciate the introduction. I really do. But you know as well as I do, and it's not false accolades when you say that you're honored to have the opportunity to do the work that we do. And I felt that way all along. The awards are really what I appreciate so much. People feeling like they want to say what they say when they provide you with an award, but it's always about the backdrop of that makes that enriches your life. So I'm honored to have had the opportunity to do the work. Each thing that you get a chance to do, you're grateful that you can contribute, and it's something that one of the reasons why I think we get into education and why you do the work that you do is to be able to serve others, and it really means a great deal to be able to have had that opportunity. So I appreciate you mentioning that, but believe me, it's about the people that we supported to get that to happen, and the reason that you're able to do it is because of them. And that's what this program, I think, I appreciate about this. We get a chance today maybe to talk a little bit about that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one way that I kind of like to start things off, and, Bart, thank you for that introduction again, is really just to ask you a simple question and just to help people get to know you a little bit better. And Bart, mentioned that you're, really into golf. You have an amazing golf cart, apparently. Hopefully I'll get to see it at one point in time. I'd love to play golf with you. But just tell everyone that's watching something that maybe you're just really obsessed with at the moment.
So, I right now it's my grandchild, and it's going to sound kind of strange, but it's forgiving yourself for not hammering down and working as hard as I've worked all of my life. It's forgiving yourself for not having to have a crazy type-based schedule where you're always going from one thing to another, and feeling like it's okay to relax a little bit. And my obsession now is in spending time with my wife, who over all those years, she sacrificed a lot for me to be able to do the things that I did. So we're remodeling parts of our house again, and we just finished redoing the garage. It's stuff that I would have never had time to do when I was working really, really hard. So I like that a lot. I'm kind of consuming my time now with things that are more personally enriching and relationship building. In a strange sort of way, COVID provided some of that, because we've been home together. You find out if you really love the person that you're with when you're with them 24 hours a day, and you're captured like a hermit crab. And if you find yourself not arguing and actually enjoying the other person, probably did pretty well in enjoying. And that's kind of Fran and my thing. We've been together for a long, long time, and I'm really grateful for her. So that's if that makes sense. It's not about any individual thing. It's about understanding more, developing more of that sense of it's okay to be maybe a little bit more of a sloth, as it says. Always hammering it.
Absolutely. And, I mentioned this in last week's show, but, we had another guest on a few weeks ago, Mr. Doug Wardell from Spokane, Washington, and he really emphasized very similar the importance of creating those memories. And it sounds like that's what you've taken this opportunity. And we'll look at this COVID pandemic as an opportunity in some ways and in some ways not. But you've taken this opportunity to, sounds like, kind of develop some of those memories with your grandchild and with your wife.
Yeah, there's always a yin and a yang to every situation, right? And the yin, if you consider that to be the downside, the yang is there. In the case of Zoom, and all of us that are on Zoom a lot get tired of it. If you're going from early morning until late at night, you're constantly meditating. That almost creates another level of weird anxiety. But it also provides an opportunity for you to do things more efficiently and to see people in a way that you normally wouldn't see them. So I've enjoyed that part of it. I'm looking forward to having face-to-face, by the way. We finally got our first shots last weekend. So it'll be nice to be able to actually to see you, Wes, face-to-face as a real human being, whether the golf course or not, instead of a person on a two-dimensional person on a screen. But yeah, there's a positive side to all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Bart touched on this earlier with, just some of the different accolades that you've received over the years and just accomplishments that you've had. Who is someone who's been a really influential individual and really led to a lot of what you've been able to accomplish over the years?
So when I went to a small college in Winona, Minnesota. We grew up in an interesting part of Chicago where we didn't have a whole lot of money growing up like a lot of other people. But as a part of the Catholic Church, they would take, in those days, you wouldn't remember Bart because you weren't even a thought in anybody's mind at the time. I mean, Wes, but Bart probably does that. There was a real effort to try to help people that were coming over as immigrants or first, second generation to access the middle class, be able to access this American dream. And so the Catholic Church pretty much cultivated that, and so I was able to get to a little liberal arts college for not a lot of money, and they put scholarships together and all the rest of it. So I'm up there in Winona, Minnesota, and I ended up getting drafted during Vietnam. Came out, was in law school, got drafted out of law school, and decided when I completed that service that I'd go back to law school. Well, I had to go to law school at night and be able to work during the day, and so I was going to be a cop. I mean, being a police officer, a lot of my friends did that, and then you go to law school at night. Well, Illinois had scholarships for veterans to become teachers, to get certified to teach. So I thought, well, it might even be better. I can teach during the day. I'd have summers off, go to law school, maybe do a full-time thing to maybe accelerate the law school experience. And so I got into teaching, and boy, it was my first real love affair, to be honest with you. I just fell in love with the profession. So I ended up becoming a teacher, and then after about 5 years, 6 years, like you do in most districts, you've got to get it to move along the salary schedule. You've got to get advanced degrees and that kind of thing. So I decided to get a master's degree, and they had a consortium, kind of a creative consortium for inner city teachers, and I did that, and it was a wonderful experience. I turned out to be the only white guy with 23 black inner city teachers, a white nun, and myself. We spent 19 really wonderful months together in a really intensive master's program, and just really cool. Well, anyway, you could pick one school to graduate from, and my father had spent 9 years schlepping a briefcase to DePaul University to get his bachelor's degree, and I was a little boy when he was doing that. So I thought, well, I'm going to get, one of the schools was DePaul, so I said, I'm going to get my master's from DePaul to honor my father as well. So you had to take 2 classes. It's a long answer to it, little question you asked, but anyway. You had to take two classes from the university that you were going to graduate from, out of the 10 in the consortium, from whatever one you wanted to get a degree from. So I took a class in counseling and one in administration. So I'm in the class that was there fine, and you had to pass those 2 classes before you can get your degree. So I'm in the administration class, and it's about the second week, the beginning of the second week. And the professor, who was a very, very formal guy, bald-headed guy with a 3-piece suit and very, very stern, but also real smart. And I was afraid of him, but I liked him a lot because he was just so bright. I see him go over to a person that's sitting, we call it in Chicago kitty corner. Out here we call it kitty corner. Kitty corner for me, and I see him bend over, and he says to the person, you have a choice here. You can withdraw from my class, and it won't hurt your GPA. This is somebody, by the way, I didn't know because I'm in the class with, I think there was one other person from my group that was in there, but the rest were just students from DePaul. And he said, and you can withdraw, or you can stay in the class, and I will fail you. So the guy didn't say a word. He picked up his books, and he left. And so I went, oh, whoa. So I was very quiet, finished the course, and afterwards a bunch of us would meet for a little adult beverage. And I told him that story. I said, man, I'm staying away from this guy. I've got a semester I got to put up with, but I'm going to be real quiet and be a little, fly on the wall in this class. Well, next thing I know, 2 weeks later, he said, Pedicone, I want to see you after class. And I went, I'm screwed. I mean, what did I do? I think I've been doing everything well. what could I possibly have done to make this guy mad? So he said, after class, and he says, John, have you ever thought of going on for a doctorate? And I stopped and said, not really. He said, well, you think about it, and if you're interested, I will take you up to the University of Wisconsin, where I got my degree from, and I don't do this very often at all, but I'd be willing to help you if you're interested. So I'm driving home on the expressway, you know, I'm thinking, man, Dr. John, I could drive a taxi for the rest of my life. Dr. John, you know, little Italian guy from Chicago. So I went home and talked to that time. Of course, I was married. I talked to Fran and said, here, listen, let me tell you what happened. And I said, I think I want to do it. So we committed to doing it. I went back. Jack took me up to Wisconsin, introduced me to a guy named Jim Lippum, who was a top researcher at the University of Chicago. And I fast-tracked and finished the doctorate through him. So over the years, he and I collaborated on a number of things. He became this mentor and this person that showed an interest in me like nobody else had ever done before. So anyway, long story, over the years, I lost touch with Jack, and I was really upset. So when DePaul University would send a development person into Tucson once a year, I'd meet with them and I'd try to give some money to give back to the district, to the school. But I said to the guy a few years ago, I said, look, I want to give you, and I'll give you a decent amount of money, but you got to do me a favor. I've lost touch with my mentor, the guy that I just love. Would you help me find him? You can certainly find him easier than that because he no longer worked. He was an older guy, no longer worked at DePaul. So it took 2 or 3 of these development people to finally do it. And this last year, 2 years ago, we were in Chicago for a month. We tried to get back there for some time during the summer. I was able to connect with Jack. I was able to tell him how much I appreciate him, what he did to make a difference in my life, how it changed my family and my whole trajectory as a result of his kindness. And I could say thank you. So we did, and I donated some money to take a couple of kids that are disadvantaged to get through DePaul University in his name, in my father's name. So I think Jack Lane would be the guy that I would point out that helped me move forward. And of course, my father, but Jack Lane, those 2 guys are my heroes for sure.
Wow, very cool. You tell amazing stories. I can listen to your storytelling all day. You know, I want to jump into another topic though, and just kind of lead in. I think that's a great lead in for everyone watching, and that's really to talk a little bit about, you know, food service and kind of how you got into that industry. But specifically, you know, how does food service fit into the mission of the contemporary public school system?
Yeah, well, you know, it's an interesting question because it's like it's should be asking that question with regard to every support service. I think in school districts, every one of us, unless you're a teacher in a classroom, is a support person. It's really my job as a superintendent was to support staff in effect, because you're supporting what a teacher does in the classroom to be able to have our mission met, and that's to make sure that kids get educated. So food services is critical in today's environment where we have so many kids that come out of environments where they simply don't get good nutrition. In many cases, they don't get fed. You know, the only reliable meal that a lot of our children get is the meal they get in schools. You can't have an environment where kids are learning when kids are hungry. And so to me, it's absolutely critical, and it's changed over the years now. You know, people used to view food service as the lady. I did when I was a kid. The women with the little hairnets on that served. That's in Chicago as an Italian. They would serve pizza with American cheese. And my mother would go crazy when I go home and tell her. But it was good, actually. It wasn't too bad. But you thought of food service as being that environment. Today, it's a scientific environment where people that are running those programs, and I can mention the food service directors in the districts I've worked in and other support below them, who have to be very, very knowledgeable about what food and nutrition means. We're getting more federal dollars to be able to support the very things that we need to do to make sure that kids come to the schoolhouse, are fed, and when they get there, they're fed and taken care of. So it's a critical part of the mission of public schools. We could not do what we do without it. And I mentioned to Bart, talking about stories. This is a discussion. So I tend to talk a lot about the things that you're asking me questions about. So if I'm talking too much about those things, you got to let me know, and I'll pause for a bit. But I had a person, when I was in Tucson Unified, you can imagine it was a very big district, and so I have a great administrative assistant, Karen Bynum, and because it was such a large district, Karen would kind of protect me. You know, she was kind of the bulldog that made sure that I wouldn't have to be assaulted by the wrong situations, and oftentimes I'm not the one to answer the question. It ought to be the person that's closest to being able to solve the issue. So Karen would kind of screen through those things, but I told her, if there's ever a person from the community or a parent that has a complaint, I really want to deal with that complaint directly if I can, and I don't mind taking the call at all. And I just as soon let them know that, hear their perspective and let them know what mine is. So I had a phone call. Karen comes in. She said, you're not going to believe this. This woman is really angry. She's angry because we're feeding kids. And I said, well, put her on. So she gets on, and we start talking about. She said, why are we using my tax dollars to feed children, providing them food when you're a school district? And I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, let me just tell you, first of all, how the food service programs work. We get federal funding to be able to provide food for kids. I went through that whole thing. And I said, we're providing something to children who otherwise wouldn't have it, and would come to school hungry. And she said, so that's a good lesson for them. I mean, if they're a little hungry and they find out that they got to work a little bit harder, maybe we're not going to have that drag in our society where people feel like they're suddenly entitled to everything from food to, and she went down the line of the services. And I said, so let me make sure I understand what you're saying. You're suggesting that students that would have a hard time learning if they're hungry should be encouraged to do that, and that we don't have an obligation to address that kind of need to be able to actually have those kids get in the classroom and learn effectively. And she said, absolutely. And I said, okay, I understand, and this is one of those situations where we're going to have to agree to disagree, because as long as I'm the superintendent in this district, or anyone I think that sits in the seat would say the same thing, we're going to feed our children, take care of them, and make sure that that they have the things they need in order to have the opportunities that they deserve and that we're obligated to provide to them. Food service does that. So that's my story about kind of a call that I felt I didn't know that people could feel that way. About you learn something every day. That's what food service does. It provides a life safety net for children to be able to do the things they've got to do in order for us to do our job. So it's a very important function.
And it sounds, based off of your responses, that you've always been just a huge advocate of the child nutrition program. But not every director is blessed with a superintendent like yourself that is really an advocate for them. What type of advice would you have for child nutrition directors to really improve that communication between them and their superintendent so that they can have that collaboration?
So I don't know too many. I know a lot of superintendents. I don't know too many superintendents that don't care about providing food for kids. I just don't. And if they're out there, maybe I really am not sure that I want to have a strong relationship with them. I just don't know who they would be. So I think it's fair to say that most informed educators care deeply about providing those services, and they care about their food service department. But if you're in an environment where the superintendent doesn't make that a priority, and you feel as though, especially if you're a food service director and everybody that works with you in that domain, I think the best thing to do is to be more visible and verbal with that leader to say, look, I'd love to have you visit so we can show you a little bit about what we're doing. Let me just tell you about some of the special programs, but I'd love to be able to sit down with you and talk about that. Most of the time, if it's a larger district, you're going to be under the supervision of an assistant superintendent or somebody else, that director. And that's the person that you go to say, let me see if we can be featured at a board meeting. Board members care about food. They care about what's being fed to their children. Even if they're not parents themselves, they care deeply about the kids that they're responsible for. So being able to encourage school leaders to let you have time at a board meeting to talk about some of the innovative programs that are going on, the way in which you actually prepare the food, maybe even some ideas about what happens when kids come to the cafeterias these days, and it's just a different environment. I remember in Falling Wells, we built a new high school, and one of the things that we realized was, kids weren't accessing the food service department, so we were able to put together a program that resembled what they were getting on the outside. Kids would come in there and they would see simulated McDonald's, and they were the places that they would visit outside of the school environment. That even though they were school driven and they were school run, they looked a lot like that. We made it much more appealing for those kids. That's a program that a board member wants to know about, and a superintendent would be proud of. So I would encourage them to know that it's to their benefit to be able to have this quality experience for children, and to be able to show the community, through the board especially, that you've got some pretty good things going on in the support services that you provide. So I would do that. I would encourage that for sure.
One of the things that I've seen through this time we've been in through the pandemic is that child nutrition has been elevated to a different level in the school districts. And I couldn't agree with you more that I don't know anybody in education that's not supportive of child nutrition. But I do know sometimes there's a communication, kind of that reluctance to go kind of blow your own horn sometimes in front of other people. But I think child nutrition has got quite the story to tell after the last year, where they've been feeding kids not only breakfast and lunch, but a snack and supper in some districts 7 days a week.
I wonder, I know that the community doesn't realize the trauma that many of our children experience on a daily basis. One of the things I know that people have heard in the media and maybe they've read about is that trauma is accelerated when kids can't come into a schoolroom where they're protected, where they've got adults that clearly care about them, having some form of abuse going on in their personal lives, that there's an adult there that will be recognize that and be able to interact and intervene to try to help the child. A lot of that has gone on. That's the yin of the COVID experience, where some really difficult things have happened with a lot of our children. So with food especially, where you've got people I don't know if they really understand that there are kids that go home to an empty house many times, to an empty refrigerator, to the worst kind of nutrition that you can imagine that they experience in their lives. And when you see kids hoarding food, we've had that happen in a number of our schools in districts I've served in, where you find kids stealing food, taking food, putting it in a backpack. And when you find out what they're doing, they're taking it home because they're afraid that they're not going to have anything, or their little sister or brother's not going to have anything. It's just tragic. So you're absolutely right. I mean, it's really important that the community understands that the board understands that their mission has got to include making sure that those kids are taken care of and fed, and that we should feel really grateful that there are services that allow us to do that for kids.
Well, I want to add one more thing, Wes, before you move on to this. Is that one thing I've noticed in communities across the state of Arizona, New Mexico, and even into Texas, is that I'm hearing from food service directors that are telling me that now parents, before you talk about that disgruntled parent, and I know that everybody in administration has heard from disgruntled parents. But there's parents now, instead of fussing, and there used to be those Facebook groups and whatnot that would downgrade the quality of food being served in the cafeterias. That has made a 100% turn in so many places, because the parents were only hearing what their kids were telling them. Now they've actually been able to see the quality of the product that's been delivered, and I think if nothing else, one of the bright shining things, silver lining in this is that child nutrition has been elevated, and people now know just how good the quality of food is. So I just had to add that. That's my 2 cents worth. I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of piggyback on that, kind of in John's words, the yin and the yang. There might still be communities that maybe aren't in that same position, where the parents may still have that maybe misunderstanding of child nutrition. What are some strategies or just things that school districts, in your opinion, John, that they can maybe do to help kind of change that misunderstanding, or that kind of, old school way of looking at, the food that's being served in the cafeterias?
So, regardless of whether you're in a large urban setting or a rural setting, communities really care for a lot of reasons about what goes on in their schools. And so, as I think, rather than only feature food service, which I believe, by the way, should be one of the aspects that you let community members know about from the very beginning, I would really feature the entire support staff function, where you're looking at everything from getting kids to the schoolhouse door. How do you transport kids, especially in large rural districts where geography is large and population is small? And what are the logistical challenges that come along with trying to get kids to be able to access public school? And one of those functions would be the quality of the food that they get when they're in school, and why we do it. So I would go out to civic groups and business groups in your communities. I don't care how large or small the community is. There's going to be those groups that are helping to support the welfare of that location. Ask for an opportunity to talk to those groups and talk about what goes on in schools. And there are, superintendents are really pretty good at that, because they know that when it comes to passing overrides and bond elections, they want their communities to know that they've got a good system operating, so that you're not only knocking on their door when you want something, but you're letting them know on a regular basis what a school district does and how you operate, so they gain confidence when it comes time to asking them for something. It's a little bit easier. So you can feature food service so easily. People understand food. They understand why it's important to feed their children and what that really means. And you can really do some pretty special things if you just make an effort to be able to get out there and do that. So that's the best answer I can give to that, is take the effort to find out who those groups are and say, can I have a program, and spend some time talking to you about what we do.
Well,
Yeah.
it's also understanding that the food service is part of it really is part of the instructional mission of the district. Transportation is really part of the instructional mission. So is maintenance, because you and I talked earlier about, the fact that how that's all intertwined into one doesn't work without the other. It's like a building block. It's like, education is like a big Jenga in a lot of ways. And there's so many pieces that support things. People look at the top, they pay attention to the top, but they don't always look at the things that are underlying that are foundational to a district's operation.
Yeah, it's really true. So I can give you a tale of two cities with two districts, one of 6,000 students, that's Flowing Wells, and one when I was there of about 50,000, and that was Tucson Unified. So what I found in Flowing Wells, when you have a smaller number of students and a closer knit community, we had 13 and a half square miles in Flowing Wells. That's what the district is. And so it was much easier to demonstrate in a smaller environment how all those things were connected and how everybody was interdependent. If one didn't function, it affected the other one. That interdependence is what every effective organization understands clearly. When I got to Tucson Unified, they had really remarkably good people. And by the way, I don't know if Tucson Unified food service people are listening, but I sing your praises every time I talk about the services that I really appreciated in Tucson Unified. Food service was the only area, by the way, that operated in the black from the time that I was there and well before I got there until I left, and I know it continues to. Very well run, very efficient. People were dedicated and concerned about what they did, and I just really respected the food service program, as I did the other departments in that district. But food service was very special. I don't say it because we're doing a food service program. It's the truth. So anyway, when I got there, what I found was that the larger as would be expected, the larger the organization, the more likely it is that you create these silos, because everybody's operating under systems that they know more about than anybody else. And there's a tendency to isolate, and you don't really think about how, because there may be limited resources or you're under a lot of pressure, how do I have regard for the other support services that I need to be concerned about in order for the district to operate as a team? So we spent a lot of time talking about the difference between independence and interdependence. Give me a really good team, a great team with really good players, and give me a bunch of great players with a poor team, and I'll beat you 9 times out of 10 with that great team. Because it's the ability for people to understand how what they do matters and how it affects the other person that makes the difference in the success of any organization. So we spent a lot of time in Tucson Unified trying to break down those barriers, and it starts with administration. They've got to share not only information but also the things that they do with each other. You can't have isolation if you expect effective teams and effective organizations. So breaking those barriers down, making sure that people understand the quality of what goes on in these departments like food service. Flowing Wells was an interesting district. We had professional development experiences for teachers all the time. And what we realized was we didn't do that good a job for a long time with support personnel. So we began to organize specific days during the year where we would plug a day in, a half day or whatever. So we'd get, you got to get the ADM credit for it, but you could do that on a half day basis, and then have the other half a day be professional development for support staff, not just teachers. Well, we were doing that for a long time, and we'd have a couple of full days for support staff as well. And I realized that the one group we never really spent a lot of time doing that with were crossing guards. These were the ciphers a lot of times. They're the people who are out there spending maybe 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours. You don't really know who they are unless you make an effort to do that. And boy, oh boy, they're so important. Those kids that come to the schoolhouse door know those people sometimes better than they know almost anybody else. And Mr. Paul at Douglas Elementary, who treated those kids like they were all his grandchildren, and those kids loved him. Those relationships that those people had, the quality of the person that's doing that matters. So we began to have specific in-service programs for crossing guards, and it didn't take very long. We'd get a cop from TPD or a sheriff's officer to come in and talk about the rules and the regulations, and we'd give them Cokes and some food and tell them how much we appreciated them. That's what every district ought to do, and everybody in that district should understand why you do that. So you honor the work that's done by everybody together, and then you got a chance to have a really effective place. Not just words, it's really the way we operate if you're an effective organization.
So those in-services that you did, were they specific for, let's say, crossing guards again? You had all the crossing guards attend an in-service, or you did the in-services for everyone, all your other support services, team members that are not crossing guards, to tell the importance of that job role?
Well, we would do both. And while you didn't spend a lot of time, there wasn't an in-service on how important crossing guards were, but you'd have them included in the main, you'd pay them to come to the professional development that everybody else did, which they didn't always do. And then we had very specific professional development experiences just for them. And they could see each other. By the way, that was another thing we found. They didn't know each other. How could they? If they're across the district, how would you know a crossing guard at Douglas, Elementary and one at Hendricks Elementary? And that's a small district. Imagine if you're in Tucson Unified, where you've got hundreds of them that are across the district of 235 square miles or whatever, to USD, I think it's about 230 square miles. So, bringing people together so that they know each other, there's relationships that are built. They can learn from each other as well. And just honoring them by providing special time that says that they're important isn't a big thing to do. It's not hard to do at all, but it's a big thing in terms of the respect that those people deserve. So, yeah, that's what we would do both. And then, we were able, and Flowing Wells was easier because you could put everybody into one big facility. In Tucson Unified, the first year that I was there, I really believed it was important to have a opening of the year assembly. So in order to do that, they'd had some bad experiences with that in the past. And the goal of my doing it was to bring them all together to see what they looked like as an organization and as a TUSD family. The only way I could do it was to rent out the TCC at a cost of, by the time all those logistics were done, it was about $35,000. So we're in some budget crunches. So I was able to access people that we knew in the community, in the business community, that paid for that. And so, it didn't cost the district anything, but much more difficult when you're in a large organization like TUSD to do the kinds of things we're talking about. But it's important that it gets done creatively or otherwise.
In the last kind of couple of minutes here, John, I'd love to hear, any advice that you have for child nutrition directors as they begin to wrap up this school year, which has been a very interesting year to say the least, and start looking forward to summer and ultimately the start of this upcoming school year.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure that I'm in a position, Wes, to be able to give advice to those folks. I mean, I just think that they do such great work. Food was available during this whole COVID experience for our children across our districts. They were working face-to-face, providing those services. That needs to be honored by these districts. When we get back to face-to-face, I would hope every district would spend a little time honoring the unsung heroes that kept those organizations going while everybody else was doing what they could do, online. The advice that I would, if there's any advice that I would give, it would be do what you can to be sure that the people that are in these organizations know who you are. I mean, I just don't, I've never worked in a place, I've been fortunate, never worked in a place where they didn't care about those things. I mean, you can argue about Tucson Unified being this big place and it seems somewhat impersonal, but that's just because of its size, not because of the feelings that people have and the culture that exists there. I found that place to be one with some of the most loving and caring people I've ever met. So it's just a matter of raising levels of awareness, making those things a priority. I think, using whatever influence you have as a director or as individual food service workers who know the community better sometimes than a lot of other people because they live in that community, making sure that you humanize it and people know who you are. So I'd give I'd give advice to the administrators to say, If you ignore that and you don't honor that and pay homage to the people that make it possible for you to do your job, so we can do the work that we need to do, you're a fool. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't be. So the people that I know and people that I respect would say the same thing to you. So my answer.
Well, are there any last comments from either of you as we kind of wrap up today's show? Just any final thoughts for our viewers out there?
Well, I'll say this, that I'm going to say what I said in the beginning, how much I appreciate you guys doing this, so that food service personnel know that they have a forum to maybe learn some things, and also know that they're important in this process. I really appreciate that you've got this going. I didn't realize that you were doing this. Bart's right. We met on the golf course, and yeah, I got a nice golf cart, but I'm not a very good golfer, so we disagree about that a little bit. But I appreciate having met Bart. It gave me an opportunity to be on this program. But I really do respect and appreciate that you're doing this, and hope that the people out there that are, if you're listening to this, please know that you may not always be told this, but any informed, caring leader, and I would hope you work for them or with them, would be saying the same thing to you. Thanks for what you do, and you make a difference in the lives of our children and the success of our organization. So thanks.
Well, I would just close with this. I've been blessed to be able to work with and around the food service staff and the staff at Ph.D. for about 10 years. And the legacy that you left carries on, because it is among, I don't know anybody in child nutrition that's not great. I really don't. But at TUSD, like so many other districts, there's that palpable family, and you can feel it within that child nutrition department. And that, and I would echo one thing that you said just in a different way, is that a hungry child can't learn.
Yep.
And not only can a hungry child not learn, a hungry child can't function. And that's something I think, as we go back into, things begin to go back into normality, and we get back into school, and we get to see each other again. Just remember this: people, they won't remember what you did lots of times. They won't remember what you said lots of times, but they'll never forget, hey, you made them feel inside. And that's what I believe child nutrition is all about, is that warmth. Because just like the crossing guard, the child nutrition department staff may be some of the few smiling faces that the children get to see every day, and then they get called by their name, and they get, so, John, you said it so perfectly, as it is support services are critical. They're critical to what we do in education.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yep. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the show. John, it's great chatting with you, and I do hope to get to play golf with you at some point. Bart, always good to see you as well. And for everyone out there watching, this has been another episode of Friday Food Fight. We look forward to seeing you here again next week at 12 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. Take care and have an awesome weekend.